Well, some 20 years ago, there was a young man in France who was a molecular geneticist who decided to leave his team in one of the most advanced teams in France working on Alzheimer's disease, and he decided to go into another field. He left science altogether. The team went on and perhaps never missed him because they succeeded, they got their results. But I met him after that. He became my husband, and I learned that there are people leaving science, even within countries. Now, I've been working on ethics in these years and trying to find what is the secret to developing responsible science. I think we have in the science area a difficulty with competition, with careers. We have a difficulty with ethics as well. But ethics depends on these human beings who make up the science community actually being able to work under good conditions with communities that encourage responsibility and with a good sense of where their responsibilities lie. I think these individuals do need support, and that's what we're here for today, with a good panel of people who will discuss different aspects of responsible science. We're trying to cover a lot. You saw from the title that we're covering also the globe. And we have with us people who can cover the globe because we are working on, among ourselves, different projects. I think you'll hear about how this works and how also in the areas of responsible science, we might be able to link people up. And so to begin with, I'll ask each person to introduce themselves. I come from UNESCO. My name is April Tash, and I've worked on the recommendation on science and scientific researchers, and I'll speak about that later, because first I would like to ask you to introduce yourself and to speak about the RING project for us as the first speaker.
Hi everyone, welcome to the session. It's great to be here. My name is Simge Davulcu. I am now the senior co-chair of ICORSA. Just as a result of the AGM meeting that we had yesterday, I was promoted from the junior co-chair to the senior position. So I'm working as a postdoctoral researcher in the work package 7 of the RING project, which I'm going to tell you all about it now very briefly in 6 minutes, I think. So the RING project admin fundamentals. So the RING project is a 3-year project. It is going into the 2nd year, and it has a budget of 3 million euros. The duration is 3 years, as I mentioned, and it has 20 partners and 16 subcontractors. So why are we doing the RING project? It's because Europe already had the RRI practices, and they wanted the rest of the world to adopt RRI, Responsible Research and Innovation. So 2 projects were commissioned to explore the convergence. The last one was called the Progress. And because these projects were following actually a top-down manner, so then the rest of the world said no due to the regional differences, cultural differences, because responsibility or ethics is perceived differently in each of the regions in the world, and also political differences. So the SWAF's 14 scope to explore linked up global world RRI, because of this, the RING project started. So if we just look at the context, the project acknowledges that each region of the world is advancing its own research agenda on RRI. Therefore, RING will not be producing a global RRI framework or a strategy that is meant to be enforced in a top-down manner, but the opposite. So we would like to learn from the best practices in RRI and rather have increased coherence and convergence via a bottom-up approach, learning from the best practices and learning from the RRI globally and from linkages via the new RING community that we aim to create by the project. So RING is a research project to analyze the transferability of RRI to other countries and regions and systems of science and policy. So briefly, the overall project aim is really to bring RRI into the linked-up global world to promote mutual learning and collaboration in RRI. And we can achieve this by the formation of a global network that we call the Ring Community Network. So by the development and mobilization of a global open access RRI knowledge base is the second aim of the project. And the third one is aligning the RRI with the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals, as the global common denominator. So we are hoping to achieve these aims through the work packages in the Ring project, as you can see here and on the posters that we are presenting. So I wouldn't go through all of the work packages, but just to concentrate more on the objectives for the time management. So the first objective is, here let's list all of them, create a global Ring network. So for this, we are going through various work packages based on the research on what is done previously in the area of RRI, summarizing the best practices, and then choosing the best model as a network, trying this model, and then hopefully operating it to start a global network. So the second objective is to create a state-of-the-art global open access knowledge base of RRI, and we will get help from UNESCO in order to do this. Then the third one is aligning, comparing, and making suggestions on how to cross-adapt RRI to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and then determine the competitive advantages of RRI between the regions of the world, and finally create a high-level RRI policy strategy recommendations for the 5 geographic zones, which you can see on the map here for the coverage of the project. So as we said, we have many partners in the Ring project, and we can categorize them according to RPO, RFO, so research performing organizations, research funding organizations. We also have non-governmental organizations, international or non-profit, and we also have partners from the research support and training organizations, as well as research centers and institutes. So Ring is truly a global project if you look at the coverage, and it is divided, it is aiming for the 5 regions by the UNESCO geographic zones as shown on the map. And after the project is completed, we are aiming to continue to have this network operating by the support of UNESCO for a minimum of 1 year. And this will be achieved by providing guidance and support to the Ring community, and the knowledge base that we mentioned will be achieved by using the GoSpin database, also by UNESCO, and UNESCO and Future Earth will be the ambassadors of Ring RRI and SDG-aligned policy. So the knowledge database, providing easy access to all RRI knowledge using an international portal called the GoSpin by UNESCO. And the first truly global survey and interview of stakeholder perceptions to RRI concepts. So the industry will get its first evidence of positive advantages of adopting RRI, and EU will learn from the best practices of RRI internationally. The first RRI network community formed and informed by the best practice network model theory and practice. If there was more time, we would like to go into the Gantt charts and let you know at which stage each work package is, but we can go into detail maybe in the discussions relevant to the 5 pillars of RRI in the tables in part B. But for now, it's just a brief information about the project. So thank you for listening and welcome any questions.
The opportunity
Is it okay if I do it with this mic rather? I'll tell you why, because I want to pretend that you don't know that there's a screen here, so when my eyes drift from you, I'm better off standing here, probably. Can somebody help me find my presentation?
Or it's already loaded. This is yours?
That's it, that's it.
I'll just take a minute as they set up. The idea is that we will be having the discussion of each of these participants here, but as you all have other things to say, and this is a session which is interactive, you need to know a few things. One is that the session is being recorded, and that is why you have a permission slip on your chairs. So we would invite you to accept to be recorded for the purpose of your questions not offending you if they are put into the recording. Another thing is that when we will break out at the end of all of these presentations and discussions, we will have sessions at these 2 tables here on themes and 3 tables outside, and at the very end come back and bring together a conclusion to the session. So now let me invite you to start your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Is it afternoon? Yeah, good afternoon. Good evening, everybody. I'm Rocky Skieff. I'm with the National Research Foundation in South Africa. It is the funding agency for science research, and the department that we report to is science and innovation. I'm going to try and jump straight into, given the topic that we'll hear about, just share with you at a minimum, some of the things we are doing that we think are in support of the topic that we are here about, all right? So, and this first slide is just telling you that the kinds of interventions that we have to secure research ethics and integrity are, we in our interactions with the beneficiary institutions, this means all the institutions that receive funding from us, obviously the individual awardees, and I will break them down individually as I go through the series of slides. And then we use a lot of persons from the community for our reviewing purposes and as panelists, and I'll tell you what we do with them to try and encourage right behavior. And then with our partners and counterparts nationally, as well as we play in the global community. So starting with the institutions, when we provide funding, even though applicants are individuals, there's a general rule and understanding that when we provide funding we only provide funding through institutions, and effectively we're really providing the funding to the institution. So we hold the institution accountable for ensuring that the right things happen. And all institutions that research institutions that receive funding from the NRF, if they don't already have this in place, they have to enter into what we call a master funding agreement. It's a whole an agreement document, and one of the clauses in that document is what you see in front of you, that the funded research is performed using highest ethical standards possible, especially in situations where human and or animal subjects are concerned. At the individual level, every individual who applies, if they are to be awarded that grant, they ought to sign and accept the conditions of grant, which also has a clause on research ethics. And there it is there. The NRF requires the grant holder to maintain the highest ethical and safety standards when conducting research, particularly when human and animal subjects are involved. The grant holder must comply with all relevant regulations in this respect, including but not limited to those laid down by the institution. On that point, what I could also mention is that, and obviously we work with institutions, there's not a dictated but a subtle expectation that institutions themselves will have policies around ethics within. We are aware that ranges from some institutions that have close to nothing to some institutions whom in fact we work with as exemplary in terms of having ethical policies on ethics and integrity around research. So to the researcher still, a subclause, the grant must be used in compliance with South African and international laws, where the latter do not conflict with South African laws, and the research outputs must be used entirely and wholly for lawful purposes. And then we run because we process basically applications throughout the country, we run many review panels. So many scientists, we do, most of our processing involves two significant stages, what we refer to as remote reviewers and then review panels. In the case of remote reviewers, those are persons who are based, who could be anywhere in the world, who avail themselves over our system to review our applications, and then those who come and sit in our panel meetings, we'd refer to them as panelists, and these are a few issues that they're aware of. So we use expert peers. We expect that they must observe confidentiality, they must declare or avoid conflicts, they must practice impartiality. We try as much as we can to be transparent with our processes. And then the last one, people have right of appeal if they don't think we've followed proper process. This is a plot that just shows you the extent to which, to which research outputs have increased in South Africa, particularly from around 2006. This has just been growing, and this is work of Professor Johan Newton. And the interesting thing, the reason one of the underlying reasons we believe we've had this trajectory over that period is government around that time when the move up started introduced what we call a subsidy for research outputs that goes to the institutions, and the institutions have some liberty as to how they may use that subsidy, and it ranges in institutions from actually some individuals getting a portion of it to the extreme where it goes directly to the research group, etc. So it has had this effect, but also we believe that it has had another unintended consequence, which I try to show in this graph. This is also work of Newton and others. What this is basically emphasizing is that if you follow this blue line, so from around 2008 or 9, there's a strong evidence of predatory publishing coming out of the South African system. All right? And then, I think this is my last slide, or second to last slide. And just to give you a feel of what is it that the NRF, maybe as part of sharing with you that we are committed and we are learning about the issue of ethics and we are serious about it. So in 2010, we've been a co-signatory of the Singapore Statement on Research Integrity. 2013, we've been a co-signatory, the NRF on behalf of the country, obviously, on the Global Research Council Statement of Principles for Research Integrity. In 2013, the NRF put out a statement on predatory journals and deceptive publishers. You can find that on our website. And then most recently, the NRF was actually very instrumental in mobilizing, I don't expect you to read that, mobilizing key players in the science system to come together and actually release a statement. And all I will highlight as a last comment, so these are all the signatories to that statement, and in going from left to right, it's higher education, Ministry for Higher Education, Minister for Science and Technology, SF, which is the South African Academy of Science, our Council for Higher Education, ourselves, and USAF, which is an organization, a body that oversees universities. Thank you.
It's on now. Thank you. Thanks for telling me. I thought you heard me better, but now it's easy. Yeah, there are other people also in the room who are from this International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. My theme given to me is citizen science, and I will get to it, I promise, but I want to tell you a few other things about some of the work we've been doing. We've been doing quite a lot of work also with remote sensing and citizen science, and some of the things we had to do in the last year when the GDPR license came was to anonymize certain records, and the very important thing is to allow people to opt in or out in certain research we are doing, and to have the option to be anonymous. That's very important. So we've designed lots of apps, citizen science apps, to collect data on land cover and land use, for example, where citizens can describe the landscape and how the landscape is changing. And we've implemented these GDPR rules. I think GDPR is important. It has a place. We've seen it coming up. But at the same time, I want to pose something a little bit provocative. And this is the flip side of GDPR. And the flip side of GDPR is that some things in research we are not allowed to do anymore, we cannot do anymore, and maybe it's unethical that some of these we cannot do anymore. And I want to tell you why. We're doing a lot of research with respect to poverty mapping, for example. We've done some work in Senegal where we use different data sets. There is also phone data, which is extremely useful. But now, and increasingly with GDPR, everything gets anonymized and GPS locations get moved. It's not anymore possible with GDPR to have precise, accurate GPS locations. And this poses a massive problem when you, for example, do poverty mapping. If you really want remotely sensed data to be used and come up with a good map of poverty, you need this information. And it's so much more difficult to get. We have had interactions, for example, with the World Food Programme. They've done a lot of household surveys. But GPS coordinates have also to be anonymized to some degree now, plus minus 5 kilometers. It's useless for us to map poverty precisely. So I think there is something else needed besides GDPR. There needs to be some new regulation which does allow this. Again, I just want to post that. There are, for example, very interesting citizen science activities where people can look at very high-resolution satellite maps and say if they see a settlement, a house, yes or no. And this is a project called Putting People on the Map. People have the right to be recognized. In northern Kenya, for example, nobody knows how many people live in the northern part of Kenya. The population numbers many times get inflated. Questionnaires are done, they're sent out because sometimes resource allocation is done based on high population numbers, and the higher they are, the more money this region will receive, for example. So putting people on the map, knowing how many people actually live at this location is a project called MapSwipe. We have similar tools called PicturePile, and that's what this project is trying to do. But if we're not allowed anymore to use precise GPS coordinates in our research, we do have an issue. Coming to citizen science, maybe I have 2 more minutes. I want to define it now. The question is, what is citizen science? And there are many different definitions out there. Some researchers think it should be very strictly designed and defined, where citizens are very closely engaged in a scientific hypothesis. Though we at YASA have been defining it a little bit more widely, whenever there is voluntary contribution by citizens for the advancement of science, for knowledge production, we then call it citizen science, and it leaves a lot of room for many activities going on in this field, also with respect to OpenStreetMap, humanitarian OpenStreetMap, where citizens are helping on the data collection. But of course, also citizens are very much engaged sometimes in hypothesis formulation and in very closely engaged in the scientific part of what is done with the data, and that's also termed extreme citizen science. And with that, I think I stop, and I will then continue maybe later on what we are doing in that respect. Thank you.
Okay, and then we will thank you and we will continue. Just briefly, I can introduce what the states are doing, because governments and lawmakers always want some kind of a hand in controlling things, don't they? Well, after all, we have heard many speakers talking about the need for scientists to be both literate in science and literate in morality and ethics in order to be responsible, but there is a limit to all of that. So let us say that the ethics field really is having to move along with the sciences, and it really is a process. We don't have to have one unified code, but we do, within the UN system, do some work on this. And what we use is human rights. Human rights actually is a very rich source, and it goes beyond what people expect. And so what we have done recently in the UN system was involving 195 countries, and this includes the US and includes the countries that you don't expect are working with UNESCO today. But we did, over 4 years, come to an agreement between these countries about how the organization of science should take advantage of the human rights that are agreed as the basis for future of science. What they came up with might surprise you, because it's not that well known. We don't have a lot of communications people and branders, and we're not as good as the television community to get this word out. But it's a useful thing to look at in the context of responsibility, because it brings together themes that you'll hear in all the other projects. And what I like when I hear about other people's projects is the coherence. This is also why we're working so closely with the Ring project, for example, because we hear the coherence. When we're using human rights, what we find is that the UN's work, originally started in the 1960s, has been based on a balance between freedoms and responsibility. So while we speak in terms of the freedoms based on human rights, and we think of, for example, the right to freedom of expression. Freedom of expression of scientists is a heightened freedom of expression, because in this context, we consider that scientists are like journalists. They have a special role in society. But that means they have a responsibility to speak as well. So freedom, responsibility, it's combined. We don't even really separate the two. So yes, they have a freedom of speech, and yes, they have the responsibility to speak as well. Now, these things can be more carefully designed in the legal systems of each country, because within the conventions at international level, there's room for some discussion. But I want you to know that 195 countries agreed to this wholeheartedly with no abstentions. So we have the basis for the scientists to have free expression. For example, it seems like nobody knows this, but for example, this includes PhD students. This includes people who are not working in academia. They do not have tenure. This is nothing to do with academic freedom. It doesn't have to be granted. It is already granted. It is based on human rights. So since you have it, and by the way, human rights in every court in the world will, if there is a conflict between a contract and human rights, the courts will recognize the human rights. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean you have it instantly, because we have scientists who are in prison, we have scientists who are not having their freedom of expression recognized, we have scientists under threat. So as we work with documents like this, we are realistic, but they still need to be widely known. So that's about the balance. But then what we have in this new phase, because it's only just starting, this document reads a lot like the AAAS documents from the 1950s and 60s, and the AAAS really led the charge to get this kind of work started in the 60s. But now that it has been reasserted very recently and in the context of science under threat, it should be known that this document now exists and that they have decided to add to it a not only explicit link to human rights, but add to it a monitoring procedure, which also means that non-compliance can be brought into the context of non-compliance with human rights. It means that non-compliance can show up in the context of UNESCO's non-compliance system, which is 4 yearly reports, and another system at the Human Rights Council. So what I would then tell you is that we're collecting information now about, and we're having all the countries do this, until the end of 2020, about how well the conditions of scientists are today and whether scientists do have things like freedom of expression and freedom of conscience, autonomy, and other features of this document. All of this will be collected over 2020 and reported in 2021. But I'm actually the staff person. If you have any ideas of how to measure such a thing as academic freedom in the context of science, please tell me, because most countries don't know how to do that, and we're trying to invent it as we go. So these legal aspects that we sometimes confuse with ethics are on the outskirts, but they can sometimes be very important to our discussions of ethics and responsibility. They give a context to all of this, and the responsibility of the scientists to speak probably isn't something that has been emphasized in terms of our ethical discussion, that we see that there is a treatment by the governments of scientists as having a special place in society. So that was an introduction to this document and what the states think. And now I'd like to move on to a sort of an extended discussion. But here I'd like to introduce to you, you would like to present something, I think, about the subject of open access.
Yeah, thank you. I have some slides, but I will be very brief. Not find it.
Yeah. This one?
Oh, yeah, this one. Okay, maybe I start to introduce myself.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so thank you everyone for being here, and good evening to everyone. Yeah. For my presentation. My name is Faten Atik Bahar. I'm from Tunisia, but I'm based in Germany. When I introduce myself, I usually say that I am scientist, activist, and author. Scientist, I submit my PhD in energy engineering, and now I am Alexander von Humboldt Fellow at the University of Rostock for the Climate Protection Program. Author, I have published more than 19 books and translated some books from French to Arabic, and they are published and distributed between Tunisia and Morocco. And activist, executive committee member of the Young Earth System Scientists, yes, I represent today. Future Earth, one of the Nexus Camp steering committee member, and Future Earth Africa. So I'm happy today to give this brief presentation about open access, a statue in the Global South. So, but before moving to this topic, let me please introduce our network of the Young Earth System Scientists. I will be very brief. The Young Earth System Scientists is an international network. It unifies international and multidisciplinary early career researcher in a powerful network to provide them a voice for a better future and to serve the society. Yes, is extended in more than 110 countries, and we have more than 1,400 members, as you may see here in the map. And for our structure, we have a kind of strong structure. We have different working groups, science working group, outreach working group, online working group, membership working group. I have been like executive member since 2016, and we have like election every year to define like the new executive board. We are quite active in science, and we produce perspective document and also papers. Here we have like some examples of the document like we have published it together, and through our document we define our perspective as early career scientists. I can give 2 examples related to our topic today, which is open access. Open access to information like is very important for us in YES, and it was like in our priorities in 2 of the published document, in our white paper and our last document published last year. When you talk about open access, I will go very briefly through the definition because we will have the time to discuss this in the second table. We talk about available underlying data, we talk about open licensed data, we talk about machine-readable data, we talk about data that we can download and use for computer, and we talk about free of charge data that allow everyone to access to it without any budget and free to everyone. And why it is important? Because it has like many impacts on the science, on the society, on the economy, and on the performance of the country. And also we may have maybe the time to talk about it later. And the problem that is open to information is like very well developed in some part of the world, but not the development in other part of the world. For example, we have like the top 10 countries on open data are more developed countries, and there is some example, and this is from the global UN Data Revolution Report and the Open Data Barometer Global Report. And bottom 10 countries in open data belong to the Global South. To discuss this and maybe to ask why, maybe because the challenges are more related to the infrastructure, to the policy and the framework of each country, the involvement at governmental level, and what we need is like more initiatives, collaboration, partnership. And our discussion will be around how do you think that we can improve it? And we look forward to further discussion on this issue on table 2. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Maybe I just want to add something to what you said. I think one important part and piece of this open access issues is also related to the mentality of the people, and this relates also to my topic, to transformation. And I think we are seeing this quite a bit also happening at the moment in Europe, where more traditionally compared to the US, in Europe actually a lot of data and a lot of open source code was not shared at all. But there are a lot of journals now evolving where researchers are really encouraged to share and open up their source code, their data, their models, and there's this new evolving paradigm around so-called knowledge hubs. So in these knowledge hubs, you basically make everything you do in your research, when you, for example, have a model, open access and available. So you are even publishing the source code and somebody else can rerun this model when this open source code becomes accessible. And I think we are indeed in a transformation there, and I think a lot of other countries can learn from that process happening, and luckily these journals are helping us to do so, and also researchers are getting increased recognition for doing that. And people talk about data CVs, where researchers can show how much data they've actually made available. But coming back to transformation, our institute at IASA is doing quite a lot of research also on climate change, on how we can stay below the 1.5 degree target, and the result is we need behavioral change. Essentially, we need some social transformation. And I think there is a lot happening, but there is a real urgency to this, and I think this can also help us to bundle our energy on one topic, which is to reach this climate target, but in general to reach the SDGs. And we've done some work also looking at how citizen science can actually help to address the SDGs. For example, there is a lot already happening with respect to monitoring the SDGs. For example, in the field of biodiversity, there is massive citizen science movements globally where birds are counted, where species are recognized, where the abundance of species, in particular birds, but also others such as iNaturalist is an application. The occurrence of species is recorded, and based on that, the important bird areas and key biodiversity areas are defined. And that is one of the measures used as those indicators used in the SDG framework to understand if we are on track with reaching the goals. And I think there is a lot of work going on by citizens which is not fully recognized yet. For example, the indicator 9.1.1, where there is a measure taken how many people live within a 2-kilometer radius to a road in rural areas. That is a measurement, but a lot of this data is going back again to OpenStreetMap, where citizens have actually made this data available and collected it. Bottom-up activities, so there's a lot happening. And again, citizen science coming to the transformation we need has a lot to play, because if citizens are more actively engaged in research, not just us scientists, but more the general public, very likely we will also have and see an impact on the overall consciousness within the different countries, and this can potentially also lead to less egoism, less populism, and a much more educated, wider public. And by collecting data, people become much more aware of their environment. There has been also research shown in, for example, Uganda, when people started to measure water quality, that by doing this action of data collection, they became much more aware of the need to use safer water, and they were much more attentive to toxic water. So the data collection process is one way also to engage people more generally in science, and has a big role to play. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to invite our last speaker.
Thank you. That was right on time. We managed to set up things. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maral Dadvar. Since 2017, I'm a member of Global Young Academy, and since then I was the chair of the selection committee at the Global Young Academy, and now I'm the executive committee member. And in these past 3 years, I have been very actively involved on finding ways to improve our diversity, inclusiveness, and having fair ways of selecting our new membership. So to very briefly introduce Global Young Academy, which probably you have already heard about in other sessions, Global Young Academy is an international organization of 200 excellent young scientists from all around the world, and then at the moment we have members from 83 countries, and we have 280 alumni. And the main vision of Global Young Academy is to give a voice to young researchers, and also to promote the inclusiveness and presence of young researchers in decision-making processes and all around. So yeah, that was a bit too fast. Let's say that while we are an academy where we greatly value the excellence. At the same time, for us, diversity is of great importance. And although we are really trying to find ways to improve our diversity, there are certain challenges that we also face, which I believe that this is not something just at Global Young Academy, but I think these are challenges that most of the organizations who care about their diversity would face and should consider. So I would think that the main challenge is to keep the excellence the priority while trying to improve the diversity of an organization. And by diversity, I mean both like in disciplines, nationalities, gender groups, so in all aspects. And also to make sure that diversity and improving the diversity of the membership does not override the main mission that an organization has. So we should always remember what was the main mission of an organization, and then trying to focus on the diversity. And also it's important to distinguish and recognize the correct underrepresented target group is an organization. So it's easy to just assume that we are missing a certain target group in an organization, but it is very important to understand who are those certain target groups and take into consideration the differences which exist in the groups. So today I would like to briefly tell you that how we at the Global Young Academy are trying to address these challenges and are trying to improve our diversity. So what we realized was that we need to start from earlier stages to do that. So where we start first from is when we are sending out our membership call. So we are trying to make sure that we have better outreach, and in this regard, for example, we translate our call in different languages. The flyers are translated in different languages. We have formed a diversity committee, which its aim is to identify the underrepresented target groups before we send out the call, and we make sure that we aim those target groups and they receive the call. And we also have this possibility when the call is out for the applicants to ask if they have any questions, have this question answering possibility for them. So trying to help them to really fill out the form. And then it's the membership application form itself. And we try to consider excellence relative to opportunity, which I think is a very important point. And we should not just assume that everyone has the same opportunity, and we cannot define excellence as one fit for all. We should consider backgrounds, opportunities, nationalities, and everything when talking about excellence. And we try to design questions to be more inclusive and give applicants more option. And then comes the membership selection procedure, where we try to make the selection committee aware of the biases that they might have unintentionally. And also we define these diversity weighting factors that try to give this boost to the underrepresented target groups which were identified. And next to all this, we also have other initiatives such as At-Risk and Refugee Scholar Initiative, which aims to reintegrate excellent early career researchers who were forced to move from their countries, and try to give them the opportunity to reintegrate in the society, and especially in the research society. And also we have the Women in Science Working Group, which again works towards promoting women in science and raising their voice in different aspects. So this is a 5-year pilot starting from 2017, and we have interim evaluations to make sure we are on right track and see how all these hopes and dreams that we have are really working out. And we are happy to see that so far we had a very significant improvement in our gender diversity. And while the number of countries from which we have members have increased, but we see that the members from developing countries have also increased, our initial analysis shows that this might be due to the reason of how we define, country of residence and nationality for our memberships. And now we see many young scientists who are originally from developing countries, but now are residents of developed country. So it's hard to really, we should decide and see what should be the right factor, the place of residence or the nationality. So this is an ongoing challenge, and we have a long way to go. If you have any experience, please do share with us, and for more information about Global Young Academy, you can visit our website. Thank you.
Thank you for your indulgence. We went quickly through these subjects, but the idea here, we did not try and define for you what is the subject matter we're talking about. But as you can see, we've talked about the interaction with the public, we've talked about gender diversity and other aspects of diversity, science evaluation and how to be transparent. We've talked about all of and the goal, the overarching goal of the Ring Project is to bring together people who have in mind the aspects of responsibility. What we thought to do with this project at this stage is to use your thoughts. So we have the table set up and we would like to invite you to move to them, but the key thing here is that we need tables that are themselves diverse. And we're not only looking for geographic diversity today. You don't have to be telling us all the different aspects of your diversity, just geographic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the five global regions that UNESCO uses, and I'll tell you what they are. And so I would ask that just people, and I'm going to do it backwards, just to challenge you, just people who want to stretch and come from the Asia-Pacific region, including Australia and New Zealand, could you stand up? Because if anyone in the room, okay, now that I've met you, now that I've met the two of you, I would ask that you simply avoid to sit at the same table, okay? The idea is that you represent some diversity among yourselves. Now I'd like to ask people who are representing a region of Latin America. I'm not expecting there's too many, but we have one. No, he's the technician. You don't want to be counted. Okay, do we have any others? No, we don't. Okay, would somebody like to pretend to represent that region if they have parents from that region? Yeah, no. I've seen it all at UNESCO, really. I've seen staff represent small island states when they couldn't send a diplomat. What about, this one should be easier, Sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa, we have one. We have two. I would just ask you to be at two different tables. Just avoid to be at the same table. It's easy. And now we get to, let's see, Arab states. Arab states? That includes, yes, I know, you're included. And there's a second. And anyone else? Arab states? No? No. Okay. Then we have this, it sounds like we have too many people from one big region, which is the Europe, North America, and Europe includes Russia and Turkey, by the way, for this purpose. It also includes Israel. Yes, so I think it's everybody else. We have everybody else in the room. You have to make sure you're all at different tables. So now's your chance. We're going to get up and stretch, and we're going to move to a table. I'll tell you what the themes are so that you can find them. Here in the room, we have gender, we have open access, and we have three other meeting places. Yes, just a moment. I'll just announce the tables first. We have, the tables are open access is here, gender is here, and then we have three other tables outside which are covering the issues of careers, the citizen science and social innovation subject, which covers also research integrity, and sustainability and environment. Okay. You have a question?
No, I just wanted to say, maybe if there's no one from sub-Saharan Africa, I'll take someone who has ever been there.
We should all join. Okay,
can embed subliminally in people's minds.
Egy, kettő. 3, 4. Egy, kettő.
Thank you. Okay, yes. So we had a short discussion with a not very diverse table, unfortunately, but we got some interesting points to talk about. First, I cannot find her, dear colleague, shared her experience about a program in Cork, that how at universities that at the moment is applied in Ireland and UK, they're defining certain guidelines that at university should be applied. So when they want to get funding and become like a PI of a project or so, they should make sure that the group and team meet that certain guidelines. And also in Vietnam, we discussed that very interestingly how there is already and historically the equality between men and women, and so this is not a big issue there. And the women have always been the really the main person who's working in the families and at the house, and so this is something that is more culturally embedded. And then we discussed that how cultural differences can really have an impact on the involvement and then diversity among gender groups. And we also discussed that how the opportunities and possibilities that society provides can affect us, such as the childcare and the facilities that exist in a society for that. And so if all the responsibility is just for the women, then they work less and they are less involved. So having better childcare can also help to have more involvement for women. And last, we discussed the gender equality at work in Italy, and how Italy is third place in growing number of immigrants there, and how that has affected the balance at the workplace, and the steps that are being taken to address this matter in Italy. Thank you.
Okay, all right, okay. Do you want me to stand up? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, perfect, all right. Mm-hmm. So we had a discussion about sort of ethics of citizen science and around those areas. So some of the things we discussed that come out of this when you think about ethical science is who's the author of the publication, any resulting publication. So is the citizen science just a data collector, or is their role bigger than this? Should it be bigger than this, and how to facilitate that? We also spoke about the issue with citizen science, which is about quality assurance. How do you ensure quality assurance? And some of the research actually points that some of the citizen scientists are better than the actual scientists, which was quite interesting and counterintuitive. And the other big thing we spoke about was about sort of motivation for citizen science to take part. For many, it's to have fun. Others to contribute to something bigger and broader than them. But that was seen as of interest, and possible there's ethical issues around that. I think that I've gone through my notes. I don't know if I've missed anything, if anybody thinks we should add in. No? Okay, thumbs up. Okay, good.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'm Ala Zain, I come from Lebanon. We had the table discussing research careers. Unfortunately, the time was not enough, for the topic is really very diverse. We had representatives from the US, from Africa, me, the only one from the Arab states, from Europe, and from others. Actually, what we found out mostly is that the situation is really very different in terms of regions. So whilst the representative from the US finds that there's a lot of opportunities, whether in terms of private or public sector, a lot of research opportunities or industrial or in other agencies, the situation is totally the opposite in other regions. So we had also another representative who is from an Arab country, but he's doing his PhD here. The main concern was what's next. So always these young scientists who even leave their countries to go abroad and do their studies in good, reputable institutions, they're always worried because they're asked what you're going to do after your PhD. Are you going to stay where you are, or are you going to go back and then get stuck maybe in the same position for the rest of your life, or you're going to do just the same thing that you used to do before even going to do your PhD? The situation between like maybe the Arab state and Africa, for what we found out, and we knew that there's a report which is called the GLOSIS, that's the Global State of Young Scientists in Africa, which as we were told it will be published and finalized to be published in December, just next month. It has a lot of indicators and data that is present about the state of young scientists in Africa, but interesting enough, we found that there's a lot of common challenges between the Arab states and Africa. So even after doing your PhD, you have no money, no funds. Even when you come back to your country, you have no mentor. You cannot have your own lab. You cannot have, mainly the only difference that we had is like they have much more number of universities in their countries. So all what they get maybe teaching positions, but they can stuck there for the rest of their life just teaching and not doing any research. For I can say Lebanon and the Arab states, it's neither teaching nor research. So the number of universities in Lebanon, we have only one public universities and the rest are private, but still the number is the same since so many years. And the number of PhD holders is much more. That's also another difference that we found out. We have a high number, so to the point that you have a lot of applications, even from people who are graduating from the US and Europe and are of maybe Lebanese or Arabic origin and want to go back, and they're all competing for one position that's open every 20 and 30 years. So you have to wait for someone maybe to retire or stop doing his career to be able to get a chance. And so sometimes you either shift your career. Me, myself, I have a PhD in biology, and I've recently accepted the job more administrative as a director of a medical library, although I haven't thought of that on my life. But, or you have another choice is just to leave the country. And that's the big brain drain that we're having and suffering from. So I guess these are some of the things that we were able to come up with in the short time that we had. But did I miss anything? I guess we're fine? Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So we were looking at sustainability and particularly in governance. Sorry, I tend to wander a bit. So one of the things we quickly came to realize, because we had a good spread in our table, so we had members from Lithuania, Sudan, Japan, Canada, UK, Turkey. So one of the things we quickly came to realize is that it's quite different for every country. So in some cases, what's needed is not funding, what's needed is technical help for it, because if funding is sent through a system that's inherently problematic, then the money disappears and the issue is not alleviated. So what's needed is skill sharing rather than funds, than a block of cash. The other thing we realize is that in every country has their own SDG or goal that they're focusing on, and in some cases there's consultations between the public or what goal they want and what they should focus on. So we came up with the idea is that maybe a good fix for it would be to propose that there should be a scientific advisor within every country. And the role of that is that they will be a high-level mediator between Ministry of Science and people in power. So technically, in many cases, when you talk to a politician, when you talk to a policy maker, they're quite open once you have face-to-face meetings with them and you're not just a detached voice on a phone or a person writing a letter. So hopefully the idea is establishing scientific advisors in different roles. These people will have direct access to governance, and they'll help inform governments of what's needed for that particular country, because we also realize that life isn't classified into neat little boxes of, say, well, today we're going to have a problem with food, tomorrow it's going to be a problem with transportation and such. Unfortunately, life is kind of like a blender, and it's inherently, the problems in it are interdisciplinary. So that's another thing that should be encouraged, because in many cases when you have a different set of eyes looking at the same problem, that's usually when you get the aha moment or solutions that you never thought that were real. And that's mainly because once you spent a long time in a certain career, you develop tunnel vision, and you usually need a friend, someone who's from a different field to kind of highlight these problems, and hopefully that would be something that maybe helps in sustainable policy creation. Thanks.
Okay, we have one last table that will report, but just before you do, this was our interactive session, and I'd like to let you know that there's a survey online, which we would very much appreciate if you would be able to fill in the survey. The survey is for anyone who has any role related to science, science governance, whether you're a researcher, whether you're a policymaker, whether you're anything else. If you're in this room, you're probably somebody who should fill in the survey. Now, the survey is online in 14 different languages, so it's very easy to fill in. And that's another part of our collecting information and your advice. So here's our last speaker.
Thank you. Our table was about open access. Unfortunately, we didn't have many participants from the Global South, because I'm sure that they would share different opinion or different experience. We had different experiences from different perspective, and the main discussion was about open access journal or open access science. And here we're at the point of the trust or the no trust of having open access, and then the impact factor that we need to change and maybe go into impact actor that may have more impact on science, and how to involve the institutions and how to make them the decision maker for such scientific work. So I think that I have summarized the main points discussed in our table, and we had different stories from different participants, but they are could be all summarized on those mentioned points. So thank you.
Thank you to all the people who participated in setting it up and spoke, and also to the audience, because I hope you will join in the survey, but also you participated at all of the tables. So let us give ourselves a hand of applause. Thank you.